If more of you supported the show, I'd be less sick of podcasts.
The blah blah.
Sending out good vibes.
Blah blah.
Good vibes. Good vibes. Good vibes. Good vibes.
108 breaths of deep gratitude and prayers for guidance and protection. And put on a didgeridoo and shamanic drumming track. Shivers or vibrations and stuff like that.
We describe it as possession, and we feel that as a physical thing. You know, we take the mushrooms, we put the music on, and then we feel, you know, our bodies begin to shake and all sorts of crazy stuff happens, and then suddenly, you know, you're up dancing and speaking in languages.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerican Show. Episode 553, shebang. I don't know if that's a fancy number. We'll be at 555 soon, and we did have our 9-year anniversary a little while back. I don't think any of you sent in like a anniversary donation. Kind of fucked up. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to chat with Glen and Mick a little bit later. Psilocybin shamans. And this one is a doozy. It starts off a little wild, and it really sort of, you know, it finds its flow. Turns out to be a fantastic chat with these guys who really are doing some important work down under in down Australia way, I guess.
Yeah, in Sydney. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure if I should even put Sydney, but I did put their email on the show notes in case anybody local does want to go through this. They do like these ceremonies every Friday for healing, and they put a lot of people through it. I mean, I do want to mention a little bit about Glen. He wanted to mention this. He didn't get a chance to, but he doesn't know I'm going to say this, but just to bring a little bit more context around the process, there was a lot more that he did want to talk about, like the vibration of his chants. And he believes it's like a harmony, like hear the kookaburras sing the same, the crickets sound the same. It's the same continuous sound, but different versions of the spirit. It's like using the same beat in a way as it sings. So when he goes deeper into this trance, he comes back sounding different, but the same beat. There was heaps that he wanted to get into with the Icaros from Peru, and they have the same beat as these chants too. It's like the mushrooms have unlocked something, maybe with a bit of help from the ayahuasca, but it's super interesting. So I just wanted to read that. A little bit more context on what Glen, like how he feels and what he's kind of doing when he embarks in this spontaneous like chanting and dancing and helping people purge. I mean, it's pretty interesting.
Mighty king of the bushes, kookaburra. Did you guys sing that song? I think that was so, like a Cub Scout song or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. How come we sang it about Australia? I mean, I wonder if it's the same song and all the Cub Scouts all over.
What about the other one? What was the other one we used to sing?
Where's Still the Mighty Moose?
Yeah. That's exactly the song I was thinking of.
Wow. How did we know that? You know why? Because I used to scare when we drove out west in 78.
How's it start, though?
Home of the beaver, land of the wilderness, home of the beaver.
Home of the beaver. Oh, no, it's land of the something, home of the beaver.
Mighty
Where
Moose.
Still the mighty moose wanders at will.
Yeah. And when we used to say mighty moose, it used to freak my sister out.
More. Boom shakalak or something like that, right?
Yeah. My sister was like 5 in the car, and she used to freak out when we'd say, "Where's still the mighty moose?" And because I guess we were driving through the woods in Ontario, probably. Like,
what about?
Because the moose were freaky for kids, you know.
There's
They're
one
monsters.
where we screamed fire. I remember. Fire! The cow kicked it over. Old lady Leary lit the lantern in the shed when the cow kicked it over.
I don't know that
one.
A
hot time in the old time. He doesn't do that. What about the song that never ends?
I don't know that one either.
This is a song that never ends. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it a long, long time ago, and now continue singing it forever just because this is the song that, and then just,
Is that from a movie or something?
No, we sang it at camp.
Really?
Yeah. That one, and then there's the fire one, the lantern in the shed. I guarantee you some of the listeners have heard these songs. I mean, you are quite a bit older than me, so you guys might have been singing different songs.
Yeah, maybe.
You look like you got sun. You've got like 8 or 9 days in a row, almost 10 days in a row of being out and getting things done. You must feel great.
But what do you mean? Yeah, I feel good. Except the government's calling me 3 times a day.
Just block that. Just block that.
The government's bugging me. But I feel good. Yeah, of course. So we went out today. I've been walking Zeus though. He got in a big fight today with a cat out. I have him on his lead outside the front door.
So he got in a fight on his leash.
Yeah.
Was the other cat not on his leash?
No.
So
and I fucking caught it early, and I ran out there, and I'm like, Zeus, come here.
So
and
the other
just
cat
hissing at me. He's hissing at me. He's got, Zeus actually ran after him and jumped on him. And then they did that typical like cartoon ball of fur rolling around, just, and then he came back in and he's hissing at all the other cats in the house here and hissing at me. And he was just losing it. He was just freaking out. Like, I felt terrible for the guy.
You should. You've got him out there. The other cats are calling him names. I guarantee it.
He's got a fucking harness on him.
He's finally had enough of the local cats making fun of him. And then you bring him in the house and he's mad at you guys too, because those other cats in the house are probably making fun of him. And you've done this to him. So, I mean, I got to side with Zeus on this one.
He likes going out for walks. We went out for a walk today. He
my God. I need to stake your house out and get a picture of you walking this cat. This is something I need to do. So, what do you got? You're back from Montana. You're on quarantine. Actually, you broke quarantine today. Came out and shot some arrows. Lost a bunch of arrows. And, we know.
Well, I got lots of stuff to read here. I mean, I got kind of a post that I want to read and a post from a listener that I wanted to read. And then I've got, I've got a quote, sort of like a couple pages from Hints of Esoteric Theosophy, which is now available on audio. It's about the theosophical letters going back and forth from their newsletter from the 1800s. It's a pretty interesting book.
Sign up for our newsletter.
So yeah, I got that kind of stuff. Yeah,
from the 2020s. You can sign up for our newsletter from the 2020s. So, do you want to let them know who the archer champion is, or should I?
Well, you are. You're the archery champion. Yeah, you've. I can't even blink with that proper eye. Like I have a lot of. I don't even have a sight to go. I don't even have a sight to look through.
I mean, it was good we got out today because you're a mess. So it's good that you didn't go too long just like doing, I don't know what you're doing. You're just like eyeballing the arrow and just like, fuck it.
Oh, yeah, just going with the void.
Not using the peephole.
Going with the void, just the intuition, like they used to do in the old days before they had compound bows.
No, they didn't do that. They used their skill as bowsmen to shoot things. They didn't just like shoot it into the void and hope for the best. The ones that didn't live long enough to procreate, so we don't know what happened to them. They might have been really good void shooters once in a while. So, what do you got? What do you want to start with? What do you got for me to play as a jingle?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've got this long quote from the audiobook, and I've got a couple posts that I want to read that are kind of freedom based, They're kind of, and you've destroyed my, you've what do we call it when you step on my toes on Instagram? Because like I've sort of been controlling the Instagram account, except that you put these, whenever you think you've got a funny meme or whatever, then you just push it through the Instagram
and push it through.
Storm it. So what do we call that? When you're getting people all riled up about this Roe versus Wade thing. I mean, I don't even want to get into all that.
I don't want to get into it either.
But well, then why did you post something about it?
Because I just want to poke the bear.
So now I got to deal with all the comments and stuff.
I don't give a fuck, if I'm being perfectly honest. I have probably, I'm not saying anything, but I'm not against not against it. So
I appreciate that. I don't have an opinion on it either. There's a real nuance to things there.
Business.
It's just, but whatever. Everybody can have their own opinion. That's fine. There's a total nuance. It's just, to me, it's rage spiraling, right? Like Sal had a great post about it too. He's just talking about how it's just manufactured rage spiraling. You know, everybody's just raging about, they don't even really understand what's going on, and they're raging about it on both sides. Like, so
if there's a time and a place where it's probably not a bad idea, another time and place where it's probably not a great idea, and I don't know any of the fucking details, so I'm just gonna shut the fuck up. My only point is, if you weren't saying my body, my choice, when people were trying to poke me with a fucking needle so that I could go and eat, then I don't want to fucking hear it. Shut the fuck up. Yeah. Because you've lost your fucking standing, or whatever you call it. Whatever, it's not standing.
Credibility.
You've
or
lost
whatever,
your credibility. You've lost whatever the fuck. So just shut the fuck up. That's all I'm saying. Because I see a lot of it. I see it everywhere. I see a lot of it everywhere. The people that were okay with me being ostracized against.
Yeah.
That are very much not. And I was saying this a year ago when they were saying that. I was saying, where the fuck are the my body, my choice people right now? They don't got much to say. Well, now they're back. And, I'm with you. Yeah. But where were you when I needed you? So that's all I'm saying. I'm not against it. But as soon as you post that, now you're against it. I'm against it. I'm not against it. I'm just fucking saying you didn't have my back. But now you want my support. Anyway. I've said too much already. Too much already. Spam Graham at Grimerican.com.
Yeah, send me all the hate mail. That's fine. Send me all the feedback. That's fine. Graham at Grimerican.com. Your experiences, your stories, your sightings, your synchronicities.
And send me the support. Grimerica.ca/support. So I can continue to pay Graham.
I got some fantastic emails from some listeners, but it's too deep. The rabbit hole's too deep, and I can't even read them on the air. Like I'm trying to find a way to get him to but he doesn't want me to read it, so I can't really even read it on the air. But it's deep stuff,
That's
deep
why
state.
The social media is good, because you can just dump whatever you want in there, and I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. Well, then let's talk about. So this is a listener, I think, of the show. She at least follows us on Instagram. I want to read this post out
already.
It's a really.
Is it from today already? No.
No. This is. But I've been saving this for the show. It's just it hit me in the fields.
So what jingle? Oh, the fields. We got. Is this a freedom?
Is there a field jingle? Well,
I wish I had a jingle of you crying. That would be the one. That would be the fields jingle for sure. But
there'd probably be drumming involved.
I don't think there has to be.
No, there doesn't. Even just a Kate Bush song will do it.
I think you were crying the other day, like almost crying during an interview. You were close. Yeah, I think so.
Do you remember what interview it was? Was it Mick? Was it Mick? Was it this one? It might have been this one.
I don't think it was this one. All right.
Because this is about recovery and addiction too. We get into all that. But it's pretty interesting interview.
Graham the Eckhart Tolle Whisperer.
Oh my God, yeah. Was that one, maybe?
And now another edition of the Grimerican Goodies by the people, for the people.
Okay, I have to just caveat this. I haven't read this in a few weeks since you posted it. So, oh boy. I hope it's not like totally inappropriate now.
Now?
Yeah, I think it's about, let me just, what's the title of it? It's, Am I Black Pilled? And Tommy and I were talking about this when we were driving around in Montana on our trip about what is black pilled and the definition of it and stuff. So here she goes. It was when I watched my countrymen rise up only to be ripped down again with violence, frozen bank accounts, the imprisonment of peaceful political dissidents, some still locked up, and a make-believe narrative based on a podcaster's joke meme, which went all the way up to the Senate, I may add, that I knew we were fucked. It was my black pill moment. And while I write this, the parasite class, hashtag, is still making burning eye contact with us, pantsless, flopping their flaccid wieners up and down while mouthing the words, what you gonna do about it? Being black-pilled feels less doomer than I thought and more like an acceptance of reality. I've accepted that we're not going to turn this ship around via the old methods that we once believed in. I've accepted that life is going forward is going to be difficult in ways that most of us are not accustomed to. On a personal level, I've accepted that I'm unable to act in the self-preserving, preparatory way that I want to because I'm poor. I did the best I could within my means, stressed the fuck out about it, and cried many times. But at the end of the day, I'm still a sitting duck. It is what it is. I've stopped listening to the propagandized diarrhea that comes out of our politicians' mouths. It's full-on trolling now, and I'm no longer giving them my energy. I've also minimized the time I spend consuming play-by-play doom porn. That phase is over. We're in it now. We know. I've done my best to refocus on myself and my pre-clown world goals. The light stuff helps balance out the heavy, and I've been feeling better. I've done well at laughing my way through post-2020 Canada and creating joy where I can. But I've let the darkness psychically distract me too. This is their most powerful weapon. They bank on it. They fap to it, feed off the soul energy they reap again and gain more control from it. It will be difficult to stay in the zone as they tighten the noose, but I'll do my best. Best case scenario is we turn this around and I haven't totally allowed them to hijack my life. Worst case scenario is I spend my remaining days of semi-freedom investing in myself and the potential for a better life. That's low job _ LOJOB.
Wait, that's read that last bit again.
The best case, worst case?
Yes.
It'll be difficult to stay in the zone as they tighten the noose, but I'll do my best. Best case scenario is we turn this around and I haven't totally allowed them to hijack my life. Worst case scenario is I spend my remaining days of semi-freedom investing in myself and the potential for a better life.
Those seem like good options.
What?
Those seem like good options.
Yeah. That's what I think she's getting at is she's kind of just like her black pill seems more like an acceptance of what's going on than a total doom,
I don't think just because you've acknowledged the fact that nobody's coming to save you is black pilled though. Well, maybe it is. That's sort of what they're defining it as. I don't know what the definition is. I'm just a humble podcaster. Now, well, I could be humbler, probably. Not as humble as I used to be.
How about another one?
Another one?
Another post here that I want to read. It's kind of on the same vein, so I figured might as well.
Same vein or same artery?
This artery.
It's an artery or a vein? Or
it's both.
And now another adventure in coffee enemas.
Oh, come on.
Go ahead.
This is called You Are Not Alone. To all my conspiracy theory friends. Yes, sometimes it is a curse, not a blessing to be awake. Awakening is the most liberating, alienating, excruciating, empowering, lonely, confusing, freeing, frightening, expansive journey. If you find yourself struggling as you try to process all this insanity, you are not alone. No one talks about the darkness that accompanies awakening or the grief. Not only grieving the life and illusions you once had, but the realization that almost everything you thought you once knew is a lie. The beliefs you've held, people you've trusted, principles you were taught, all lies. Shattering illusions is rarely an enjoyable experience. There's a considerable amount of discomfort that comes with growth, and the grieving process doesn't stop there. With these newfound realizations, you find yourself grieving all over again, grieving the loss of many relationships with people who just don't get it. Feeling alone, being ridiculed and shamed, not only by the masses, but for many of you, your very own family and friends too. Feeling like you no longer have much in common with the people you are surrounded by. Struggling with carrying on bullshit, shallow conversations that lack substance with those who are still fast asleep. Feeling disconnected from your entire support system because they can't see what you see. Grieving the loss of your ignorance because ignorance is bliss and reality is harsh. Awakening can be a lonely road, and you will often find yourself journeying alone. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Awakening to the realities of this world is brutal. It will have you running through the entire gamut of human emotions. You have to master the art of diving down to the darkest of rabbit holes only to come out and still function in daily life. And that's a skill people don't talk about enough. Some of you are struggling and feeling disconnected from family and friends. It's as tough It's as though they exist in another world. Please know that you are not alone. And not only are you not alone, you have an entire tribe standing with you. We may be separated by miles, but we are deeply connected in purpose and in spirit. Author unknown.
Unknown email?
No, that was a post from somebody, something I saw somewhere.
What is happening? I've been lucky. I haven't had to have like any of those conversations.
Oh, I'm totally lucky too, for the most part. It's people that are close to me have to, but I've pretty much,
even my day job, I just don't give a fuck. I'll just go to my day. What do you think about it? Well, let me tell you this. And for the most part, everyone seems refreshed by it. No one's been appalled except for one guy.
Yeah, I know. I honestly, I think we're pretty fortunate. I mean,
yeah, super lucky. I mean, I've got a girlfriend that's great. Puts up with my craziness and inability to bend. And, it's just like spoiled. We're spoiled. Maybe it's because we're in Alberta and I'm in the construction sector as well. And it's just like, maybe I'm just hanging around with a bunch of maniacs, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Because my close friends and families have to deal with it. I'm just pretty lucky to, like, even people we were traveling with on our last trip, we're talking about how they have to have these conversations with they have to choose who they're going to be around with that are still sort of pushing, what CNN's telling you to do on the news. And I'm lucky that I don't have to.
You guys do have to choose. So you have to choose whether you want us around. If you do want us around, head over to grimerica.ca/support today. There's a little button there. You can sign up for a monthly or make a one-time donation through Stripe or through PayPal or whatever you want to do. But, it's the only way we can keep going around here is if we can get people like you that are getting some value from the 553 episodes coming at you, all still available, all for free, and saying, hey, this is worth, $3 a month to me, $5 a month to me, $20 a month to me. You decide, maybe a one-time donation if you don't like that monthly shit. Grimerica.ca/support. Sign up today. Support independent, free media and help keep the value for value model as a viable alternative to, all the other stuff. And we're going to have more of the $50 Dynasty album Deus. Is it Deus? That's right? I think it's right. Anyway, we're gonna have
it's Procession is the album.
It's not
right. Deus is one of the songs right? I think on
maybe
it.
Song 2. Anyway, I think we played the first 2. I'll double check. Now this will be the third one, so we'll continue working through their new album, which of course is available now for free on a value for value basis. So check out the Patreon, sign up. It's on Spotify now, easy to get to. 50, that's FIFTY, not the number, FIFTY, dollar, DOLLAR. Dynasty, check it out. New album's out. Value for value. We're value for value. Grimerica.ca/support. Sign up for a monthly today. I know you've been thinking about it. It's never been more important time to do it. Do it now, please. All right, what's next?
Well, I mean, we were going to talk about, speaking of value for value and stuff, we're putting out a narration coming up soon, I believe, in this feed. But we do also have another podcast feed called Grimerica Outlawed. It's a completely separate feed where if you donate to that, you can pop that RSS feed into your podcast player and get the second half as well, get the full episodes. But we do have all the free ones out there too. And I don't know if this narration is going to go, I think it's going to go in both feeds or it'll be in this feed for sure, I think. But that's called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. It's pretty interesting. It'll be a pretty short one, but that's just some more value that we want to bring your way. People talk about it all the time in these communities, so it's good if people want to listen to it instead of reading this whole thing, they can. And then the book that just came out on Audible right now is called Hints of Esoteric Theosophy. And this is like some letters going back and forth from Colonel Olcott and Blavatsky to a Mr. HX. These were published in an old like the first number 1 and number 2. What would they call that? The newsletter back then, I guess, the Theosophy newsletter or the Theosophy pamphlet or whatever. It's also talking about Swedenborgian theosophy in there. There's some letters going back from Swedenborgians that they're kind of sort of arguing back and forth about the reality of this stuff that's going on. And then the appendix is called the Elixir of Life, which is really interesting. So if people want to get a little deeper into the Theosophy from a real, like this is from real communications, talking about the phenomena and the what the theories about what it is and stuff, and about whether the brothers are real or not, the brotherhood that we sort of talk about on the show on and off.
We do.
It's a great little book. I mean, but I do have a description of what the brothers are saying. If you want, Darren, a little teaser from the book.
Ooh, a little teaser from
this
the
is
book.
how they're described.
Are you
this is how
calling
the
this your quote? This is a quote?
Yeah.
It's the profound quote of the week. Darren, can you guess it?
I bet you I can guess it. Actually, it might be harder than I thought. There could be like 6 people.
Can you guess the human who spoke it?
I'm going to guess it's Schwarzenegger.
This is from a letter from the brothers to somebody in the Theosophical, or they're talking about this letter anyways. And this is sort of a quote from the brothers describing sort of what they are, which is, it's pretty interesting. So he says, "We are not gods. We are men like yourselves. A little wiser perhaps in some things, but less acquainted with the ways of the world. By a course of training involving suppression of the outward and physical and, if you will, worldly sensations and desires, and the concentration of our entire energy on the inner self and things spiritual, we have mastered, some of us more, some less, the secrets of the working of those intangible, invisible powers, of which the physical or manifested universe is the visible outcome. A scum, as it were, floating on the surface, to the physical eye, an absolutely transparent and colorless and therefore unrealizable ocean. We have succeeded in withdrawing our gaze from this glamour-shrouded scum, and in looking down into the clear depths, we have ascertained to a great extent the course and causes of the currents ever thrilling through that ocean, and ever agitating the scum that floats upon its surface. Nay, we have learnt how to a small extent to guide and direct minor branches of these currents, and so produce effects in the visible world, incomprehensible by, and unless actually witnessed, incredible to the untaught man. But we are neither infallible nor omnipotent. We are perhaps even wholly free from, nor are we perhaps wholly free from prejudices, from likes and dislikes and other similar worldly follies. Many of us certainly still love our country, our countrymen, better than other countries and people of other nationalities. We are less liable to error than you in any important matter because we take the trouble to investigate. We can calculate with certainty almost every factor involved in the equation, whereas to you, half the factors, and those the most potent we mean, those pertaining to the unseen universe, are unknown, while even of those appreciable to your unvivified senses, the majority are still incalculable. But for all that, even with the utmost care, there are cases in which we may be at fault, and in the majority of matters not of sufficient importance to justify the employment of the time necessary for the investigation, in which we form opinions in the ordinary method and on data patent to all. We are only less liable to err than yourselves, because not liable to be influenced by worldly passions and desires. We are not omnipotent. Nay, we are as nothing before the mighty tide of cosmic powers. We can do things to you inexplicable, miraculous, but they are but as the moving of a single mote floating in a wandering sunbeam. Our lives are spent in endeavoring to benefit mankind, but it is only to a limited extent that we can influence the tide of human affairs. As well might one weak human arm seek to stay the rushing waters of the mighty Ganges and flood, as we feeble band of adepts to stem the resistless stream of cosmic impulses. All we can do is, by some groin here, some few hurdles there, somewhat to alter the set of the current, and so avert here and there catastrophes that we see impending, or gain by tiny canals here and there to lead off minute portions of the stream to fertilize tracts that, but for our efforts, would have remained deserts. You have asked how it is that, if this be so, the world knows nothing of us and our deeds. Like nature in harmony with whose laws and inherent attributes all our operations are carried on, we work in silence and in secret. Like nature, unthanked and unknown, our work must ever be. All earthly rewards for our work, name, fame, the applause of wondering senates, are to us like the rest of these world's toys, mere illusions, powerless even to please those who have once looked behind them into the eternal truths above which they float. For as your great apostle himself, an initiate, that would be Jesus, grandly said, the things that are seen are transitory, but the things that are unseen are eternal. And well for us that it is so, since our records afford too many instances of men, well on the upward path we tread, who their feet caught in these very snares have fallen irrevocably as regards this life.
Okay.
Dude, this is important stuff, though.
Okay,
I mean,
I'm sure it is.
Where are the adepts in it now? This was 150 years ago.
They've left.
If it's true.
They've left us for dead.
Right? Right? Or are they pulling the strings? I mean, we don't know.
Well, I feel like we know more after that monologue.
Yeah, sorry, dude. But I mean,
That's okay.
it's just, I had it copied there and I went back and looked because the book's out now. So
adultbrain.ca. Anything else?
yeah, can you search Adult Brain and Audible too, or would that be a
just
way to
search
go about it?
Graham Dunlop. You are the number one Graham D that comes up. All you have to type
but
is
there's a bunch of
Graham
other narrators
D.
too for Adult Brain, so
Well,
I don't want to leave that
It
out.
doesn't seem to work if you type in adult brain. A bunch of weird stuff comes
It
up.
doesn't?
No. Because there's it doesn't work. Are you trying it? He doesn't believe
Yeah,
it.
I'm trying to. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah,
no
you're right.
kidding. What do you think? I just made that up?
Well, I tried it with no space.
I would never lie to you, buddy. Oh, well, what did you think I had a space? Jesus Christ. All right, guys. We hope you enjoyed our lazy rambles. We hope you enjoyed the chat with Glen and Mick even more from across the pond. Did that. Zoom is a wonderful thing to make this shit all work. We were using Skype before that. That worked all right, but not as good. Zoom does seem to be a little more flawless. So anyway, we got you. We hope you enjoy the chat, and we hope you support the show, and we hope you check out all other stuff. We do have those Randall Carlson tours coming up here in just like 3 months. We'll be touring around again in the Washington Scab Labs. We're going to be having a fucking time out there. Check it all out. Contact at thecavern.com for the events. Get in the chats. Grimerican.chats. Other than that, enjoy the chat with Glen and Mick. And in the song by $50 Dynasty at the end. All right, guys. Enjoy.
From all the way across the other side of the world, welcome, Glen and Mick.
Thanks for having us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's
All the way from Australia. Yeah, this will be fantastic. I want to hear what you guys are all about, and you got your faces all painted. Maybe that'll show up in the episode art, but look like real shamans over there.
Yeah. So you want to know a bit about what we do?
Yeah, let's get like a little bit of background on how you guys sort of got together and how you sort of started this whole thing.
Okay, so my background, what brought me into the psychedelics was basically my experiences trying to stay away from more harmful substances. I haven't had a drink now in 30 years. It's been my two biggest issues were drinking and gambling. The drinking's been 30 years since I've had a drink. It's been over 10 years now since I've gambled in any form. Anyone who's been down those roads, I went through recovery processes, 12-step fellowships, that sort of thing. And, it did me a lot of good. I did a lot of work in that area, and received a lot of benefits. But there was always something missing for me. I think one of the hardest things I found in that whole recovery process was most of my peers, most of the people that began that process with me are now dead. Not a lot made it.
From addiction?
From addiction, yeah. Most of the people I knew in Alcoholics Anonymous that I came into that with 30 years ago, the sort of 5-year period from when I first came in up to 5 years, most of those people are now dead, yeah. I've been to a lot of funerals, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of why it's funny. Before we started recording, I didn't realize that was your story. And I was talking to you about how I have 14 years, but I haven't incorporated psychedelics into that. But I have no issues with people that do. If that's going to help people out, then that's great. If I was early in recovery, I probably would now actually do ayahuasca or mushrooms, or I probably would incorporate that. But since I've traveled this path so far. I'm okay with it.
And I'm not sober, and I would say that psychedelics kind of play a role in me just not having a problem with it anymore, because I never did an abstinence thing. I just don't drink like I used to. I used to have a drinking problem, and especially when I started drinking, I couldn't stop, and now I can have 3 glasses of wine and be like, that's good. And
this is something we're noticing. A lot of the people that we work with, in our mushroom ceremonies are people that are, coming from an addiction background. And not all of those have ceased, partaking of what they used to partake of, but they're certainly diminished, and they've certainly got a lot more sort of, safety in that area these days, That was one of the things, I didn't want to make this, when this all began, I didn't want to make it all about, your alcohol or your drug addiction or anything like that, because, I've been around long enough in those areas to understand that, people don't get addictions. They don't fall out of the sky on them. These are traumatised people. And we work on the trauma and, and don't place any focus whatsoever on the addictions. And as a result, the people... they heal and they just stop doing what they were doing at the degree they were doing it at before.
Wow, that's great. So do you, so coming from the recovery community and all, because one thing that I do worry about my addictive self is that I would do mushrooms and then I just look forward to doing them again every week or every weekend, or then it would just become sort of more and more, more and more apparent in my life that I'd be just, sort of obsessing or doing or wanting to do them more and more.
So that was a concern that I had myself, and so have a lot of the other people that we've worked with from the recovery sector. And I think it's based on a just something you haven't been down the road yet, so you won't. It's hard to understand how that works. But my experience with psychedelics is, especially with DMT, as Darren mentioned before, you're very hesitant to go back to this thing.
Actually, that's a good point. I just was thinking about how, because of my abuse, even of mushrooms, like usually I was hammered when I did mushrooms, right? So it wasn't a true, authentic, reverent experience,
Sure,
I bet you I would have a different take and wouldn't sort of need it as often if I had that spiritual reverence for it.
I think it is, and it is very different in my own personal experience with drinking and drugging was that, anything and everything all the time, as much as you can get hold of, and, until you can't move. That was always the agenda. So, I did have that fear around mushrooms. What if I pick this up and I want to take it every day or something like that? But my experience has been the opposite. So we do these weekly ceremonies where we work with people's trauma, and I think Glen would agree with me on this. We're actually quite hesitant at times coming up to that. It's not like something we jump into, with relish.
Yeah,
it's something that we can be, there can be quite a bit of trepidation about the experience, because these are very dramatic Quite frightening at times, quite hard to understand experiences that are happening when we conduct these ceremonies. So, yeah, I can't imagine really getting addicted to it in the sense that, I was with alcohol or any other substance.
Right on. So when did you start this kind of work with other people, or when did you meet Glen, or is that all part of it?
Okay, so we began. I began this probably bringing other people into my first experiences were conducted, on my own. My first experience with DMT was with one other person. I smoked the DMT. I came back and said, "What the fucking hell was that? What has this happened?" I knew that whatever it was that had just happened, it took me, a bit of time to wrap my head around what had happened, but I knew that it was something I had to pursue. It was, I was at a point, like I say, I hadn't had a drink for a long time. I wasn't in the scene anymore, that sort of stuff. To all intents and purposes, my life had changed quite dramatically from when I was younger. But there was just, one of the biggest issues for me was the guilt I carried. I'd been a very violent drunk. I'd been a nasty person when I was younger. I did some time in prison. I'd hurt a lot of people. When I started with Alcoholics Anonymous, I ran into a guy from the States named Joe Hawke. He was a circuit speaker in Alcoholics Anonymous. He came over here to Sydney. I spoke with this guy. Something he had to say really got hold of me, and I went and spoke to him afterwards, and he helped me work through the 12-step program, which for me involved, as you would know, Graham, step 9, I went out and made amends to people I'd hurt, and I tracked down 140 people. This was before the internet.
I think that's the biggest step 9 I've ever heard of.
Yeah. It was crazy stuff. It was great, and there was people, I hunted them down. I just said, I really don't want to drink again. I carry so much remorse about the past, and I tracked people down all over the country. This was before the internet. So I'm just picking a last name and ringing 50 of those in the phone book. And are you the person I punched in the face in 1986? But I had some amazing experiences that I won't go on about it too much, but I had this great big list of people I had to go and see. And one of the first ones was an old lady who'd lived up the street from me. And one night I'd got drunk and, in some sort of madness, thrown a whole heap of rocks on a roof. And I picked her first because I thought it wasn't a big deal. I thought, she's going to be one of the easier ones. And I went and saw this woman. She invited me in. She said she was very appreciative of what I was doing and, et cetera, et cetera. She sat me down and made a cup of tea. And she told me, how wonderful it was that I wasn't drinking anymore and, turning my life around, et cetera. And then she said, I just need to let you know one thing. She said, my 96-year-old mother was in the room where all those rocks hit and she died the next day. And for me, it was the first time, I sat there in stunned silence, and she came over and gave me a hug, and she said, don't bear it too hard. And I thought, how do you do that? But it was the first time, and I've had some of these major perspective shifts over my life, and that was a very dramatic one where for the first time I realised I was hurting other people. I'd never really seen it that way. When you're down and out and you're all burnt up and trying to fix yourself with alcohol and drugs and all that sort of stuff, there's a certain sort of mindset that a person can have where you actually believe you're the only one hurting, and that's how I'd lived my life. With the trauma I'd experienced when I was younger, I'd always just thought, I'm the only one who feels like this. And it didn't, and when I heard other people, I thought, you can bear that, because you've got a good life and I've got a bad life, But I walked out of that place with a different perspective, and I tracked down the other 139 people, and each one of those experiences was some eye-opener to me that, that brought me out of this, what would you say, solitary, perspective on the world that I'd lived in. And, so that was mine, and it was an amazing process. I've never drank again. In fact, people ask me these days, do you ever want to drink again? For me, it's like alcohol just doesn't exist. I just don't see it. And I can be at parties and I can be around people drinking and that sort of thing. And it's been a long time since I even looked at that thing as something that I'd consider putting in my mouth, So the problem was basically just removed somewhere during that process rather than, me having to do anything about it. And, which is good for me because I'm the sort of person you tell me to do something about it, I'm going to fuck that up every time, So luckily it was just taken away. But to get to the psychedelics, I picked up a gambling problem somewhere along the line in those 30 years of not drinking. I ended up in prison as a direct result of that. I did 2.5 years maximum security prison, which was quite an experience in itself. Got out, went back to the gambling, thought this is a big problem. I need to get some help. So I went to Gamblers Anonymous and, began to work with people there. I had a lot to offer them. They had a lot to offer me, etc. But the same thing was happening in Gamblers Anonymous that I'd seen in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was that most don't make it. It's just, and I tried to work out, well, why is it that some people, they come in, they're sincere, they're in a whole heap of strife, etc., etc. They're willing to do whatever, but they still don't make it. And I began to consider, what is behind this? Why when these people seem so determined, are they just, going back to destroying their lives after, a period of not doing so? And I think it finally occurred to me that because I'd done a lot of work with people in these programs, that we're dealing with, Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step fellowships are a really great thing, and I'd never say anything negative about those programs. But sometimes people are just too traumatised. And if there's no focus applied to that trauma, what you're dealing with is somebody who every time they try and make a move, they've got a big anchor tied around their foot. And a fear comes up that anything that's going to expose that trauma again is going to be too much for them to bear. And as generally what they do is they run. They run back to what they were doing before. So I had a lot of things going in my life. And what happened was my daughter was admitted to hospital with a what you'd have to call a polypsychedelic overdose. She'd taken 10 different sorts of psychedelics at a rave party or something like that, and she ended up in hospital. And I went in there and I did the normal father thing, and came down hard, and you need to do some serious thinking, and you need blah blah blah, all the normal angry father stuff, scared father talk. As I walked out of the hospital one day, it occurred to me I didn't know what I was talking about, and that's something I really try and avoid, carrying on about things that I know nothing about. So I realised I knew nothing about these psychedelics. I began to do some research. I started to see a lot of the studies coming out of the States around PTSD and trauma and that sort of thing, and they were doing work with vets and, basically, breaking through where no other method had broken through. And I thought there's something to this. The point that tipped me over the edge, though, was actually watching Mike Tyson on Rogan, and where he talked about his DMT experience, and he talked about how it had changed him as a person, and he no longer thought the way he used to, and he didn't want to hurt people anymore and all this sort of stuff. It had a big impact on me. So, I got some DMT. I had an experience with the DMT, which I described before, which just blew my mind. It took me, I tried to wrap my head around what had happened. I got online and I had a look at what are other people's experiences with DMT, and one of the most amazing things I found was that my experience tied in so closely to a lot of the things I was reading online. They talked about going up this tunnel, they talked about coming to this lotus, they talked about breaking through, and a lady speaking to them, and I know there's many different types of DMT experience, but this is one that seems to be common. And that was exactly what had happened to me. I thought, this is incredible, And I chased up some DMT, and I tried a few more times, and, I couldn't leave this thing alone. What happened to me, a big event happened to me. I was away on a trip in Melbourne, which is about 1,000 kilometres south from here. I was alone staying in a motel room down there for work. And I rang somebody I knew and said, do you know anyone in Melbourne I can get DMT from? And that was lined up, and I went and got a gram of DMT. So I'm sitting in this motel room, and Darren maybe knows this, that, it's very hard to have that psychedelic experience with DMT if you're nervous or anxious or you're worried about who's going to walk in or any of these sorts of things. So I'm sitting there in this room, and I've smoked the recommended 30 milligrams of DMT. Nothing's happened. I'm in the motel room, there's doors banging all over the place. So, the anxiety's there. I've smoked another 30 grams, 30 milligrams. to see if anything had happened. I've done this over and over until I've smoked the whole gram of DMT and nothing's happened. And, you know, I'm considering maybe I've brought some dodgy DMT, you know, maybe this isn't the real thing. I'd no sooner thought that than the whole thing hit me at once. And what I experienced was an hour of shaking and tears rolling out my eyes, and it was an experience of all that guilt and shame that I'd carried throughout the years. The DMT didn't just take it away, it forced me to feel it. You know, as I said before, I'd been a very violent person. I'd been a very, you know, antisocial, sociopathic, you know, individual on the alcohol and the drugs, and, you know, carried just a great big ball of guilt and remorse about these things. The DMT brought all that out, and you know, it's never come back. It's never ever come back. It was something that stopped me in a lot of ways from having the life I wanted to have. That you know, that remorse and guilt. Stop, you know, when you're full of remorse and you're full of guilt, you're ashamed of the person you are at a core level. You know what I mean? And I'd done a lot of things to improve myself as a person and my persona, etc. But that stuff had stayed with me. When that's in play, it's very hard to have relationships with people. You know, and it's very hard to accept love from people and that sort of thing, because your basic core belief is you don't deserve it. You know what I mean? So with that out of the way, so many things changed from that point on. I had that, as I said, I had that experience. What then ensued was 8 hours. I went on an 8-hour journey on DMT, which, you know, I haven't heard many people having an experience like that. What it felt like was happening was something was being downloaded into my mind. And I have heard other people have this experience before. So that went on for 8 hours. From that point, you know, I began to consider how to bring this to you know, my traumatized friends, how to, you know, where do we go with this thing? I might just stop there. If you've got any questions at this point, I'll answer any questions, because we're about to move into the cold mushroom.
Yeah. I do have some questions, because I mean, we had Gordon White on, and he talks about how you're able to, through these ayahuasca ceremonies, that he's been learning how to lead, I believe, and some of the shamanistic stuff that he's working on, that he's able to access all these old memories, right? Memories that we don't have. Like me, I've got this trauma and I don't even know where it's from, right? I go back to these childhood things, like, and I don't even remember. Like, I got caught with an ex-girlfriend once by her parents, right? We were having sex in her parents' room. And I talked to her a couple of years ago here, and I didn't even remember it. I don't even remember that event, right? I've just suppressed all these memories. So, I mean, was this experience that you had, did these memories pop up and you had to deal with them at all? Or was it, how can you, I know it might be hard. The language doesn't even do it justice, but is there any way you can describe sort of how you worked through that?
Sure. So they came at me as a film clip running in high speed, put it that way. And so so every emotional attachment to each one of those experiences, and put this in perspective, you know, I physically assaulted over 300 people when I was young. You know what I mean? I wasn't a lightweight when it came to being a madman. You know what I mean? I'm sitting there with this clip of just all these incidents, and it's not just that; it's the way I've related to my children, my partners, you know, people I do business with, all this sort of stuff, and it just kept coming faster and faster and faster and faster, with the emotions attached to those experiences just hitting me, you know, like a ton of bricks. If I could have run, I would have run. You know what I mean? And this is a great thing about psychedelics, that they actually, once you've taken that psychedelic, once you've taken that substance, you don't get to run. You can try, but it's just going to make things harder for you. You know what I mean? So
it almost sounds like a near-death experience with the life review kind of judgment. It almost sounds like that's mythological judgment.
Yeah, and what it did do is it gave me a verdict on that judgment, which is something that I desperately needed. You know, after the experience, there was absolutely no doubt that had been processed and gone. But there was also a feeling that it was a deal that had been made. We just did this for you, but you got a job to do. So, you know, the 8-hour download that ensued afterwards, you know, to me was that deal taking place. That they were putting some stuff in my head and saying, this is a job ahead, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Darren, do you have anything before we move on to the mushroom aspect and get Glen in here?
No, yeah, I want to hear how Glen. I'm ready to hear from Glen.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, well, I've always been into psychedelics since I was young. Me and my mates used to go picking mushrooms, and it was always a big part of my life. I've always, been interested in it. And I was going through. So I was a very angry man. I used to go home from work and just fucking always be like stressing on everything. I'd be overthinking stuff. Like I'd go home and I'd be thinking about for the next week constantly, all this stuff. And I was just going through a difficult time in life. Anyway, and so was my partner at the time. And I just thought maybe I'll start growing some mushrooms. So I've read a lot of Paul Stamets books and that, and learned how to grow mushrooms, different stages of it and that. And the first ones that I grew, I thought, all right, I'm going to do some in the dark here and see what happens. And I lied down and had some in the dark. My missus went to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I had this really crazy experience, had this feminine energy calling me in, telling me to go with my gut. And I was like, whoa. And then a few days after that, my mate rings me. He's like, hey, I know this magician down Melbourne who's doing ayahuasca. Do you want to come down and do it with me? I'm like, fuck, all right. So we went down to Melbourne. We had a ceremony with this guy, Teo, a magician down there. Rest in peace. He's passed away, unfortunately. But we had a beautiful experience. And then I come back and I had an argument with my partner, and I actually broke up for that day and told her I need to move out of the city. I can't be here anymore. I need to be closer to nature. So she's like, all right, if you move out, that's it. So we broke up, unfortunately. And I thought, I want to learn. This ayahuasca actually made me make big moves in my life, like go with my gut. So there's got to be more to this. So I wanted to learn more about it. So I saved up some money and I booked a month in Peru to do 14 ceremonies. And then as time went on, I saved more money. I thought, fuck, I'll book another retreat. And so I've pretty much booked myself in to sit for 2 months of ayahuasca nearly every night. I don't know, until this day, I don't really know why I went to that extent. I was like, but I'm thinking now it's prepared me for what work I'm doing now. But yeah, I sat 2 months doing the ayahuasca, and then I come back. I got back with the same girl, which is probably not a good move. As time went on, I split up with her after a month, and then I met Mick's daughter online. And found out that Mick was doing the work that he's doing. And then I thought Mick invited me to go do a ceremony. So we did one ceremony here together with a few of his friends. And I had a beautiful experience. He said, you're going to see this code on the wall. And that night, I actually seen all this code on the wall. And then later on the night, Maria, one of the ladies we had here, she come out and started talking to me. And as she was talking to me, I started coughing and like purging outside on the balcony. I didn't think much of it. I come back inside and everyone talked about their experiences, and then after that, a few weeks later, we did another ceremony with Mick's daughter and with my ex-partner now and Mick, and I started to do all these weird things where I was like crawling on the ground and making weird noises, and then my partner was like, "You fucking weirded me out the other night. What the fuck was going on?" She's like, you'll be like a gremlin on the ground, and I'll fucking rip my shirt off, and I was dancing and doing all these fucking weird things. And then the next day, she wigged out on me that night, and I thought, fuck, what am I going to do? I come back to Mick's place in the morning. I said, dude, what the fuck's going on? And he's like, the spirit come into you that night, and you'll fight that. And I didn't really think that much of it. I thought, fuck, I'll go back home, hang out with Georgina. And at that time, Georgina, well, my partner at the time, Mick's daughter, was having difficulty with some things, and we decided to go to my mum and dad's and camp out for a few nights just to help her out a bit. And we did a little ceremony. I only did maybe a spoonful of mushrooms, it would have been half a gram. And I sat over and I got her to lie down on the ground, and I played the drum over her body for about half an hour. And then all of a sudden I start crying. My body gets all hot and I start crying. I'm like bawling my eyes over the top of her, and then I start coughing and coughing and coughing. I look down at my hand. My hand's all like green and old and shit. And I was like, what the fuck's going on? And I didn't really understand much even back then. I didn't understand it much. And then I listened to a podcast. I forget what podcast it was on. It was a lady. She was talking about doing shamanic work.
Whitney Fox?
No, not Whitney Fox. It was on I forget his name.
Because because she mentioned this, and I was gonna say this. Maybe it'll come to you as I talk about this. But in her ceremonies, she realized that people purge for each other. When you're connected in a group like that, you're not only just purging for yourself, but you can purge to heal others. They can purge through you. You're like the vehicle of them to purge their trauma through.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And I listened to that, and I rang my partner at the time. I said, I think I know what's going on. Like, this is exactly what's happening. And I was like, and she's like, fuck off. That's not what you're talking about. Trying to put me down. And I was like, no way, this was fucking happening. And then anyway, a few weeks passed, and Mick was like, oh, do you want to come do some work with me? So I could come work with Mick for a few days. He goes, do you want to do a ceremony tonight? I'm like, oh, all right, fuck it, we'll come. So we had a ceremony started, and Mick was like, you go in the front room with Stu and you look after Stuart. And I was thinking to myself, I just had 5 grams, and I'm like, oh, fuck, this is a bit weird. I'm going in the front room with old mate. I said, fuck it, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try and see what happens. So I went in there and I put my hand over the top of him, and all of a sudden I started fucking like purging and crying and coughing. And then this fucking voice started coming out of my throat, and I was over the top of him, pretty much yelling at the top of my lungs, like, and I'm doing this for fucking 2 hours straight, maybe an hour and a half straight. And they're also at the same time sitting down going, what the fuck's going on? And my mate's like, dude, I don't know how to fucking tell this to anyone. And I'm like, I don't know either. I'm walking around the room thinking, oh, fuck, this is what I have to do. And then Mick was like, come into the room. He's like, we've got a young kid out here. He's been through a lot of trauma and that. And he's like, go out and give it a go. So I went out and put my hand over the top of him, and I was in a room full of 8 people, and I didn't really know anyone that well at that time. And I put my hand over Thomas, and it started coming out again. I started purging and crying and purging. My body started to get real hot, and I started chanting again. And this was pretty much nearly a year ago, and since then I've been working with Mick every Friday night nearly, and we've been working out how to transfer energy between people, and also purging for other people and stuff like that. So now we have people that are with us that will purge for me. It's like as I'm working and chanting, I'll have someone sitting next to me and she'll be purging as well, sort of taking the load off in a way.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, Darren, do you got any questions about that, or?
No, I mean, that must have been intense the first time around. I mean, how did you come to terms with this?
I fucking didn't know what to do, actually. I was like going back to because I was been living in my van then, and I was at my mum and dad's just lying down in my van smoking some weed, thinking to myself, fuck, this is fucking nuts. And I couldn't talk to anyone apart from Mick, you know. Anyone that I brought this up, it really just gave them weird thoughts, and it was a very good difficult time because I had no knowledge. I was trying to look online, where is this coming from? I sent a message to my shaman in Peru. He just said that it's that spirit singing through me, and I got to bring more love into as I chant. I got to use more love, and I'll get good results. But apart from information from anywhere else, I had nowhere to really look. I was like, yeah, it was difficult for me.
How did your sort of journey with mushrooms corroborate with all that, or coordinate with all that, Mick?
Okay, so what happened to me after the DMT experience? A whole heap of synchronicity came into play, and I ran into somebody I hadn't seen in years, and they were growing mushrooms, and I ended up I traded a motorbike for 200 grams of mushrooms, and did a lot of experimentation. I took at one stage there, I took a dose 30 grams of mushrooms, which I probably wouldn't recommend to anybody. It's not for the faint-hearted, put it that way.
Can you take us through that 30-gram experience?
The 30 grams?
Yeah.
So the 30-gram experience was, and I don't know why I did it. A lot of things have happened that I don't know why they happened. But I'm alone one night and I've taken this 30 grams and experienced the nature of reincarnation, and also experienced that I could basically, my consciousness could transfer from me to anybody else at any time, etc. All sorts of crazy stuff, which, you know, at the end of that trip, I had to really consider, is there something to what I'm being told here or shown here, or am I insane? You know, I mean, I really need to make a decision at this point, because if I go any further down this track, I mean, you know, I run the risk of, you know, ending up in a psych unit somewhere. What happened to me next after that with the mushrooms was I took what I thought was a minor trip one night, and, you know, on that point, just a sidetrack there, we've discovered that dosage really has very little to do with what we're experiencing in this, you know, process that we're going through. But I took what I considered a small amount. I went for a walk. I made it, you know, I was walking through the main street of my town down here. That's, you know, 6 o'clock at night, people still out and about. And I started experiencing what Glenn was talking about before. I started spontaneously chanting and dancing in the street. So I quickly, you know, I found somewhere secluded, and I crawled under some bushes down near the riverbank and lay there for a few hours. And, you know, anyone, you know, who's had these experiences with mushrooms would tell you it's quite confronting when it happens, that a voice starts speaking to you, you know, that you know it's not your voice, it's something else talking to you. And it said to me, you made a deal and now it's time to go through with it. And I had no idea what deal I'd made.
Wow.
But I was sure it was referring to the experience I'd had with the DMT. And it said, up till now, what you've been shown with the psychedelics is things that you can comprehend, things that you can somehow slot into your current narrative. Where we're going to take you now is to a place that you won't be able to bring back the information in any way that's transferable to another human. And I then spent, you know, probably an hour in a place that, you know, as they said, is impossible to, you know, describe what happened there or what went on there. After that,
and that's at a low dose again, right?
That was at a low dose. That was at I think probably 1.5 grams. So major experience there. My next experience after that was with what they call paralysis mushrooms, wood lovers paralysis. You've heard of this?
I haven't. I don't know.
Okay, so it's a mushroom that, you know, grows predominantly on rotting wood. It's a particular species that grows on rotting wood, and if you take this mushroom, one of the effects of the mushroom is that you become paralyzed.
Is it native to Australia? I'd imagine you guys get a whole whack of different ones than I see up here.
Oh, definitely. But I think this is something in the States or in the, you know, North America as well. I think, you know, this is I've seen it on forums where they're discussing it in North America.
Up until recently, it's just been a shit show, right? I mean, it's been a real crapshoot on what you're getting. I mean, recently in Canada, you can, I mean, I'm trusting that they're telling me the strains are right. And I mean, I'm getting my shit from someplace that's lab grown here in Canada, and I know 100% I'm getting what he tells me it is. But yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, you had no idea.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a similar situation here where we basically have, you know, a couple of sources of supply and we stick to that. You know, we don't, it would be, you know, horrifying experience to hand out toxic mushrooms to your friends.
That you're supposed to be healing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, not even, I'd be less worried about toxic, and there's just really no way for strain identification in the black market, because it's just, you know,
that's correct.
The black market. Yeah. But so I mean, I have had a quarter gram and been fucked right up. That's happened to me before, where we were like, it'll just be enough for a nice little buzz. And the next thing you know, we're all hiding in the woods from the party because we're like, I'm too fucked up to be out there right now.
Sure. So, okay, so just back to the paralysis, and I'll move on to that dosage issue. With this paralysis mushroom, you take the mushroom, you have the trip. Somewhere in the trip you lose control of your body. You can't use your arms or legs. You're basically trapped in this experience until the mushrooms wear off. So what I did one night, I took 5 grams of these mushrooms. At the time, I wasn't aware that they would produce this effect. But I took this 5 grams of mushrooms.
You didn't know they were going to paralyze you?
No.
So that was a surprise?
I'd got them off a guy that I didn't know so well, you know.
That's a scary
he
surprise.
hadn't explained that to me.
That's a scary surprise. Were you like, holy fuck, I'm paralyzed forever?
Yeah, I considered maybe that's what's happened. But I managed to make it off the lounge that I was lying in and made it into the shower. And I thought maybe a shower will sort me out. You know, my limbs are shaking and I'm barely able to move my hands. And I thought, but I'll get the shower and maybe it'll sort me out. What happened was I collapsed in the shower. The water ran cold. I was in there for 2.5 hours with the water running on me and couldn't get up. And the experience is when you try and resist this or fight, if you push and you try and push up, it'll push back 3 times harder. That was what it actually feels like. Somebody has got their hand on you, pushing you back down. So, I lay in that bathtub and I thought, what's the way out of this mess? You know, how do I get out of this? Eventually,
it's a good thing you weren't having a bath, man.
Huh?
It's a good thing you weren't having a bath. You would have drowned.
I would have drowned. Yeah, I would have drowned if the water was high. Yeah. Anyway, I came to the conclusion that the only course open to me is to just go with this and submit. And the second I said that, okay, well, I'm just going to let go and whatever happens here. I was allowed up. I stood up straight away. I made it out into another room, and then I said, well, that wasn't too hard, and I immediately hit the floor again. And I was on the floor for another hour. By the time, that time I was quite angry with the experience, and I'm saying, I'm going to stay till I die. I don't care. I'm not submitting again. But in the end, what happened to me was my breathing was shutting down. I got to the point where I thought, I'm not going to be able to take the next breath. This is it. I'm going to die. And at that point, the voice came back to me, the voice that I'd heard before, and it said, my yoke is easy. And this broke me. I said, I submit, and I started crying and all that sort of stuff. And I knew I'd heard the term before. And, I'm not a Christian. I have no Christian leanings whatsoever, but I was raised to go at Sunday school and that sort of thing. And I knew where I'd heard it before. It was what Jesus had said.
What was it again?
My yoke is easy. And it was said to me in a way, I think it was said in that Christian terminology, so that I would understand what was meant. And what was meant that I must submit. There's no way to continue this path without submitting. But when I do submit, it's not going to be a heavy load. From that point on, I began to experience, what Glenn described, the chanting, the purging, all that sort of stuff. At the time we were experimenting. Me and 2 friends were trying this on a Friday night and seeing what happened. And I think the question you asked Glenn before, how do you slot this into, how do you make sense of what's going on and how do you deal with it? We began to experience all sorts of crazy stuff. Somebody would come in and they'd lay on the lounge, they'd take 5 grams, and the rest of the room at certain points throughout the process would all start crying. And I don't mean they pretend crying or they're making the noises. They got snot running out their noses and they're sobbing. And when the ceremony was over, the person on the lounge would be saying, I felt all that leaving me as you were doing that, Yeah, so crazy experiences with it. Yeah.
So were you both experiencing this chanting apart, like before you met each other?
No.
Well, I had some sort of weird experiences on ayahuasca where I was sort of like, it all had to do with me reaching this light, right? And then on the 13th ceremony, I reached this light. It was like this thing come out of me, like laughing, rolling around on the Maloka and doing all these weird things. Now when I think back, it sort of was very, very similar in a way. But no, I didn't. This only sort of started happening after I met Mick. And Mick
okay.
Yeah, and Mick actually asked me to work with him before this even happened. Yeah. Before I started chanting, he's like, I want you to be working with me. And then all the chanting, it's like he already knew. It was quite amazing.
Yeah. So the experience is one of, we take the mushrooms, the subject of the ceremony takes 5 grams of mushrooms. The people working with them will take varying amounts. on the point we mentioned before, dosage, what we've discovered in this setting is that even people who don't take mushrooms end up tripping and involved in the process. So, we've got a couple of people here, they'll say, I want to break this week. I'll be the sober sitter, and 10 minutes later they're off their face and and fully participating in the ceremony. We'll have cases where, say, either Glen or myself. I mean, we had some difficulty working in together because Glen has a lot of what would you say? He has a lot of power in this type of setting. With the work he does, and it's been a case of us, how do we work together, so that we're not tripping over each other's feet and getting in each other's way and all that sort of thing. So that's taken a bit of work to get through that. But back on the dosage, we've had experiences where one of us has taken none and still ends up, nothing changes. It's the same as a usual ceremony. That person's fully involved and purging and chanting and doing all these things. We've had incidents where we've taken small doses to somehow try and manage this, and it has no effect whatsoever. Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit about some of the results, or what, so how many of you are all together, and is that one Friday night for one specific person, or do you cycle people through, or?
What we do, okay, so to answer that last question first, what we do is we'll focus on one person. It doesn't always turn out that that's the full focus of the whole experience. Sometimes it shifts around the room. We're learning as we go, and one of the things we've learned, that if we're working with somebody as the subject of the ceremony, if you've got somebody else in the room who's highly traumatized, and I mean generally these are ones that are new, and we'll ask them to come along to observe and see if this is for them. And sometimes that very much affects what's going on in the room, and we can't proceed with the intended subject until we've dealt with that person in the room. So sometimes it moves around, and we're working with different people.
Yeah.
I forget what the rest of your question was.
I think it was more about just the process, I guess, and how maybe some of the results of the healing. Is this addiction based, or just all kinds of healing, like physical healing?
It started with the addiction base. So the initial sort of participants were all from the Gamblers Anonymous program, and these are people that they're hardcore. These are people who've done prison time for their offences and that sort of thing. So I'll give you one example. My very first sort of what would you say, devotee. She's a Vietnam War refugee. Her family was heavily persecuted after the war because her father had fought with the Americans, and they had a terrible story of fleeing Vietnam through Cambodia with a price on their head, and then she spent 2 years in a refugee camp in Thailand before eventually coming to Australia. Well, she came here as I was alive when the Vietnam refugees came to Australia. We'd never seen people like this before. They were skinny and starving, and and wearing clothes they'd got from the local charities and things like that. And her story was she came here. She was placed in a school. It was an all white school. She was the only Asian in the school. She couldn't speak the language, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of the Vietnamese people that came here during that time have done very well in business, and, these people are now lawyers and, scientists and doctors and that sort of thing in our society here, but they worked very hard to get to that point. So she's a girl that's, highly traumatised in this foreign environment, and she was pushed very hard by the family to become successful. She ended up a celebrity banker, working with the celebrities in the banking industry, and it all fell down on them, with all the unresolved trauma and fear that this person was carrying. So she was sort of the first person I worked with, and, by her own accounts, a lot of that, the majority of that trauma is now gone. She can remember what happened, but she doesn't feel emotionally attached to any of it. It's allowed her to, get on with her life. If physical possessions mean anything, when I first met this girl, she's driving a car with, no hubcaps, and, she all beaten up and all that sort of stuff. She drives a brand new BMW today, and, it's going very well in the field she works in. That was one of our first ones. We then we have kind of evolved into, you know, dealing with a lot of sexual trauma, a lot of rape victims, gang rape victims, incest survivors, that sort of thing. These are people that, you know, the trauma they carry doesn't allow them to just get on with it. You know what I mean? These are people that have bounced in and out of 12-step programs and, you know, sought professional help, been on medications, been on this, done that. But this trauma just, you know, doesn't allow them to have a life. You know, everything falls apart on them regardless of how much effort they put into it, you know. And we've seen, you know, a lot of those people turn around. I think the thing that needs to be sort of understood is it's not an immediate turnaround. You know, in the sense that, you know, you've got a brand new person after that. There's follow-up work to be done. There's a lot of, you know, talk therapy, put it that way, which is, you know, just us talking amongst ourselves. And, you know, one of the things that does happen sort of, you know, quite regularly is a person who's lived their life in a solitary fashion, regardless of whether they've got a family unit or not, they've still been living very solitary, suddenly opens up and becomes part of the community. You know, they become part of what we have going here, and, you know, people interact outside of the ceremonies and all that sort of stuff, and, you know, they just love being around each other, you know. And I mean, for a lot of the traumatized women that we get in here, they're basically emotionally stuck at that age where that trauma happened. You know, so we get girls come in here that were, you know, sexually abused by somebody when they're 5 years old, and what happens is the trauma lifts through the processes we do, but then they've still got to deal with the fact that they're emotionally a 5-year-old. You know, they haven't progressed from that point. So, you know, that's where the community kicks into play, and we look after each other with that stuff, you know. That might be just simple advice like, you know, don't punch that person in the face. You know, that's probably not a good idea today. You know, and stuff like that.
So Mick, maybe we can get to you to answer a couple questions. Is there anything is there a sort of a ritual of the ceremony or anything like that, music or candles or anything else that you guys use to kind of supplement your process?
Sure. So I like to work in the dark. That's one thing.
I was going to get Glenn to answer this too, but sorry, I asked Mick. But yeah, whoever. It doesn't matter who's.
Sure. Okay, so we always use music. Music's part of the ceremony. So what we use is medicine type music put out by, you know, artists on Spotify. We've got an album we use to run the ceremonies with, and that the medicine music has its own, you know, it contributes to what's going on, you know, and it takes us on a journey. We work in the dark. We like to, you know, sit in a circular fashion around the room and, focus on the person that's on the lounge. Yeah. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, we've pretty much got everyone focusing on that one person. So the power it's very powerful. Yeah. So the music, it goes through different stages of the ceremony, brings it up and brings it down, and helps us with the work.
Yeah.
How many? What's the max, or what's your average amount of people that you have? Because I was just thinking about Lynn McTaggart's Power of 8 intention groups and stuff. I mean, there's also, you know, a really interesting power increase when you've got a group of people, even just with intention, without the psychedelics.
Yeah, sure. Fully. It just brings in a lot more power and energy into the ceremony when everyone's concentrating on that. And then with the music and all that, it definitely helps a lot.
8 to 10 is our usual number for a ceremony. Yeah. We've had larger numbers. I think we've had 14 here at one time, but it gets quite hard to sort of manage that amount of people though. When we're conducting the actual ceremony, if people in the room are losing focus, it's felt. You know what I mean? You feel that person drop out of the energy field, for want of a better word. Energy field, I think, is probably a good description of it. So, you know, the more people you have, the harder it is to manage that sort of thing. Just movement in the room and disturbance, and, you know, people going off for a chat and that sort of stuff can be quite sort of, you know, unsettling to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is there pretty good feedback from people? And have you guys thought about maybe splitting off and doing your own ones so that you can do more people? Or, I mean, especially with...
It's been a constant question for us is how to evolve this. And, you know, if we really think we're doing something that's helping people, you know, how to bring that to a wider audience. Organically,
right? Without sort of pushing it. Because it came to you guys organically, right? It's almost like you got to wait for sort of the right time, or...
The way it was meant to happen.
But yeah, we're learning along the way too. We're learning, that growth isn't, numbers isn't what it's about. I think one of the important things we've found that you've got to get the core unit right. If we could just keep bringing in new people, we're leaving behind people who've already started the process, and need some further work, that sort of thing. I mean, Graham, I'm assuming you've experienced 12-step fellowship and what happens there. I was involved in a lot of groups, formation of groups in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm really, really conscious of the mechanics that destroy those things. And if you grow too fast in any sort of area like that, what you end up with is, a lot of enthusiasm, but not much base, not much solid base. So, we're determined to get things right with the people we have and then gradually bring people in, that sort of stuff. But we have considered, splinter groups and all that. And I think that's perhaps, one of the things that will happen organically in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
growing.
agree. Yeah. Go ahead, Glenn.
I say it's just growing. Like it started off with only a few of us in the living room. I think we've had about 14 to 16 people or more that have been coming here every now and then. So it is growing, and it is getting to the stage where what do we we'll have to start doing more ceremonies or something like that. But it's difficult, we've got to live our daily lives and we need to make money and stuff like that on top of it. And then we're doing these ceremonies on Friday night, and pretty much I don't sleep most nights, and then I've got to go back to work on Monday. It does get a bit.
Yeah. And so just on that point, there's we accept no money for this. We made that decision right from the start. No money to be involved. We don't sell mushrooms to people. We don't charge them for the ceremony process. It's got nothing. We've determined to keep that out of it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I totally agree with being careful on how to grow it. I mean, I was part of a Buddhist recovery group, and we grew really fast too, and then it split off and then sort of fizzled out a little bit, afterwards. And I just it got too much for the people that were running it, and we all ended up just sort of letting it go at the same time and just passing it on to other people,
Yeah, sure. And I think the thing you would have found in 12-step groups as well, if it grows too fast without a solid base, the cracks appear pretty quickly, and that comes in the form of people forming cliques and fighting and, I don't like this one and this one doesn't like that one and all that sort of stuff, which is what happens when the people haven't actually healed,
Yeah. And also you got to make sure that the people that are with you are reliable, and you need to take your time with, I mean, the next thing you know, there's a bunch of flakiness going on, or people that say they're going to do stuff and they don't follow through. And I mean, you got to make sure you got all that right first.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, because we have to. It's important to have that.
We accept
that'd be a safe space.
Safe space. Fully.
Sure.
Yeah,
we accept that people coming here are quite, they're sick. They come, they're drug addicts, they're whatever, gamblers. These people, that by nature they're con artists. They're all sorts of dangerous things. But, and I think that for us, that's a weight of numbers. We need to have the healed members outnumber the unhealed ones at all times. Yeah.
That's a good point. Has it changed at all for you guys, the process of this kind of like this? I mean, I don't know if Eve channeling, is that a good description? I mean, you guys are sort of
channeling's probably on the money. I think, we describe it as possession, and we feel that as a physical thing. We take the mushrooms, we put the music on, and then we feel, our bodies begin to shake and all sorts of crazy stuff happens. And then suddenly, you're up dancing and speaking in languages, and everybody that listens to it believes it is a language of some sort that we're speaking. But I've always described it as a spirit possession.
Is it still the same? Is it as easy right now? Has it changed? That process changed at all for you?
I think it's got easier, and I think what's happened over time for me anyway, and I'm assuming it's the same for Glenn, is that originally you have to somehow sort out. You've got your day-to-day person who you think you are, and then you've got this crazy stuff happening on a Friday night. It's like, what happened there? And my experience with the ceremonies is that probably I describe it as I'm 5% present for it. So 95% of the work's been done by something else, and I'm an observer in that. So reconciling, that sort of stuff going on in your life with your normal daily life was very difficult at the beginning. But what happens over time is the two integrate. So, what's going on a Friday night has become the majority of my personality these days, I would say.
Where would you like to see that go? Where would you, in a perfect world, where would you like to see that in 5 years?
I'd like to see it in people's families. I'd like to see them doing mushrooms together and learning about it and growing. I'd like to see the education coming out of, of people having these experiences, not even knowing what's going on. Be like, well, what? Like, they're rolling down on the ground and making these strange noises out of the throat. They've got no one to talk to. Kind of need something. So, because when it was happening to me, I didn't have anywhere to look. I didn't know where to go. And maybe this information can be like, hey, if this stuff's happening, maybe you can hone in on it and maybe you can work on something and you might have the abilities to be able to help others, which is the end goal. The more healers we got on the earth, especially ones who aren't in it for their own, like they want to help others. I think it's a great opportunity.
Sure. One of the things I see developing is that, you know, is mushrooms being worked into the medical field. This is happening, you know, globally at the moment, that it's, you know, trials and they're doing the same thing here in Australia. From my perspective, mushrooms would be a very, very difficult thing to confine to a clinical setting, because the mushrooms don't work on on that physical plane that can be well understood by science. I just don't see how you break it down to its parts like that. You know, our experience with mushrooms is that what they do is they allow us to work within other dimensions, for want of a better word, and bring that back down here and actually create effects in this dimension with that. So yeah, I'm kind of, you know, I think I think they're going to try and make it, you know, a clinical type process, and I think that's going to fall short somewhere. And what they're going to need to bring into it is the mystics and the shamans and the people that, you know that territory well.
It's something that can bring all these desperate groups together too. Disparate groups. I mean, you know, whatever side of the spectrum you're on or the belief system, most people think mushrooms are good. You know, as far as like, I was on a show the other night with a bunch of left and right kind of, it was like a debate on statism and all this, and mushrooms was just, everybody kept saying everybody needs to do mushrooms. I mean, it really is something that could bring people together.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, coming from a background where I've been in the prison system, I think it should be, you know, it should be mandatory that, you know, they're taking doses of mushrooms every day in the prison system. I think it would change the whole thing, you know.
Same with the government as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This has been
great. I think
that's
the thing is people have to remember is we don't know what shamans look like in the year 2020. I mean, we have this preconceived notion of what they look like, you know, 200 years ago or 300 years ago from the indigenous cultures that still have them. But I mean, we fucked all those cultures right up and they're eradicated in many senses. So we're going to have to find these shamans from somewhere, and we should probably not be too judgmental or too quick to, you know, I mean, I welcome you guys to the spectrum, and I wonder if that's something you guys deal with. Do you guys get much pushback?
No, not really, because I think number one, we're working in a small circle, you know, so we're not really talking to a lot of people that aren't engaged with what we're doing. The term shaman, does it apply to us? We don't know. This is something that's fallen on us rather than something we went, you know.
That's what it's supposed to be for shaman, though. You're not chosen, right? Or you get chosen, basically.
Get chosen, you know. We you know, we've certainly done some research on how shamanism works in other cultures and some of the aspects of it. And you know, some of the alignment there is, you know, both me and Glenn have had major back injuries. That seems to be something, you know, especially in the Mongolian shaman world. That seems to be a requisite for shamanism, is to, you know, have undergone some great physical pain. You know, I know myself, I've had a very painful life, which, you know, I'm not scared of death, which helps when you're working with people. You know, we're required to actually carry the burdens of others. So, you know, if you're scared of doing that, you know, you may not be effective in that field. When I work with somebody's pain, I'm okay, whatever it is, let's do it, you know. Yeah.
Does anybody try and guess what language that is, or hear what language that you're speaking? Do you think it's different tongues, or?
Well, sometimes I'm definitely speaking Rarotongan, which is a Polynesian language, because we have a Rarotongan person here who understands it and says, yeah, that's what you were talking.
Wow.
Which is, okay, no idea how that happens, but yeah.
And other times it's something else, you think?
Yeah, well, it depends. I know for myself, I go through a process in these ceremonies. So what will happen is initially, a spirit that I'm familiar with will come in and begin to work the process. And what I do is when I come up against difficulties, I raise my hand and I ask for help from something bigger. So there may be a progression of this spirit possession going on, and they may all speak different languages. Yeah.
That's so fantastic. Do you guys use a specific strain for this? Is there one that works better than others for this type of process?
Well, there's ones we prefer.
Yeah, we ones we prefer, but they're all kind of.
But we haven't seen it not work yet.
Yeah.
Regardless of what we're using. So yeah.
Yeah, it's every single ceremony this has been happening to us. Like I'll have fuck all. I'll have a gram or something. I'll come down and sit next to someone, and automatically I'm spewing and crying and spewing and crying and spewing and crying, and then whatever. Or I can even do it without it now. It's like Mick's been in ceremony and I've sat with him and he's been lying on the ground and I just start chanting over the top of him. And
pretty soon you'll just be puking all the time. Wherever you go out, you'll just be like, oh, God.
I don't know. It's got something to do with the ceremony. When I'm in the ceremony it just happens still. I can stand over I can help him through the ceremony. Like he'd be lying on the ground and I'd stand over the top of him and he'd feel me take it out of him. Yeah. So if I'm not taking any mushrooms on the night, that's what I'll do, kind of thing. But when I'm on the mushrooms, it's like I'm fucking so powerful. It's not funny. It just all this energy comes into me. It's like the more mushrooms I take, the more powerful shaman I am.
Have you seen anything physically come out of people at all? I remember hearing.
We've had witnesses in the room describe that many times. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be chanting on someone's head and Maria would see the black demon coming out. And it's like I'm enticing it to come out. I'm looking at the subject and I'm like, it's like I'm full on, like I'm making it aggressive towards me to want to come out. It's like I'm enticing it through the whole ceremony. And people can see it getting lifted at certain times when I chant harder. They say, fucking go deeper. So that the deeper that I get, the more it comes out, I think.
Yeah, so you'll see the people, the subjects that begin to shake at certain times, or their legs bounce around, or their arms are all over the place. Sometimes they sit up and scream. Sometimes they might burst into laughter. Sometimes tears suddenly start flooding out, and this will be in direct relation to something that's happening in the room, being conducted by the shamans in the room, and everybody in the room can see this taking place. You just waved this over this person's head and they sat up and screamed, and this is somebody who was lying there with their eyes closed. So, I mean, there's a fair bit of physical evidence of what's going on. I don't know how it would look if you filmed it, or it may just look like a lot of crazy people. I don't know.
Some things are meant to be filmed.
I don't think so, yeah. I get that feeling.
Maybe you just wouldn't be there like Dracula.
I'm really looking forward to the time when dispensaries and when mushrooms are kind of more accepted and
Graham called it.
People can do this.
This guy called it like 8-9 years ago. He's like, I'm telling you,
like 4 or
there's
5
going to
years
be
ago.
mushroom dispensaries. And I was like, bro, you're fucked. And now there's online mushroom dispensaries. In Vancouver, there's mushroom dispensaries. In my lifetime, you'll be able to buy mushrooms in probably every major city in Canada.
You guys have legalized weed there, yeah?
Yeah.
You can go buy weed at a shop now, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can buy all sorts of psychedelics online, and they come right in Vancouver, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's lucky.
So you can order acid, mushrooms, you name it online here. Yeah, it's crazy.
So mushrooms aren't illegal in Canada?
They are technically illegal, yes.
Okay.
They're technically illegal, but there's a giant gray area. You can order them on the line. and
but you were saying in Vancouver.
In
there's a store.
Vancouver, but Vancouver is, a little detached from reality. Let's be honest. You can also just have fentanyl in Vancouver too. That's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, but there's not a dispensary for fentanyl. I mean,
there is. Once you can't get in trouble for having it, there's probably about 50 dispensaries down there they're called bodegas.
Okay.
Actually, I think a bodega might be just for weed. I don't know. I'm probably talking out of my ass here.
So it's getting there. I don't know if it's officially decriminalized in BC, or I think BC just did something with hard drugs, didn't they, Darren? Or
yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're allowed to possess fentanyl and shit in BC now. It's okay.
Wow.
And maybe that is the way to do it. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that
from my own perspective, I'm not sure that distribution of mushrooms is a wise thing without some sort of framework that's done. I'm not keen on the whole clinical model to do that. The medical type, blending the two, but I think there definitely needs to be some
mentorship.
Where people can ask questions or get some instructions and that sort of thing. I think mushrooms can be quite confronting, for the unwary. If you think you're taking something that's a little bit stronger than weed, or it's a similar effect, or it's a party drug or something like that, I think people can really mess themselves up with it.
Yeah, well, life can be pretty confronting too if you're doing it right. I mean, that's all the fun. That's fun. That's probably why some of us get so caught off guard by some of these psychedelic experiences, because we're just like leading, like just a small fraction of the life that we're capable of the interactions and the everything. You're just like, we're all NPCs to a certain extent. I would imagine. I used to be a much bigger NPC, but I can still get some pretty NPC now and again. I mean, when I go shoot my bow for an hour over and over again, that's probably an NPC to some people at a certain level. Maybe it is. And
what's NPC?
Non-player character. It's like, definitely what I was when I was watching 82 hockey games a year and however many football games there was. And then, all the sitcoms and whatever new show was out. Basically spend all your free time watching programming or something that
Trapped in the Matrix.
Matrix, NPC, it's all very similar terms. Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Apples, not apples and oranges. I guess apples and other kinds of apples.
Before I forget, maybe we should talk about that artwork you sent over, Glenn.
Yeah. So it sort of represents something that I've seen in my experience over the past few times. I've seen this sort of snake-like creature, with
like Mother Ayahuasca almost, or they.
Oh no, Mother Ayahuasca was very beautiful. She was like a beautiful lady. I had many experiences. I met Mother Ayahuasca. She was sort of like, one time she was a serpent snake. She's come towards me, hit me in the chest, and just all this light coming out of my chest. I was on the toilet, just like, like I met her many times. This is very different. Very, very different. Yeah, these are like, I don't know what those snake things were, but they're all just flying, they're coming around me, and I've seen him in different areas of, it's sort of representation of that.
Oh, okay. And what about the sort of the hieroglyphics or the
so the code is something that I see very, very regularly in every trip. I see this kind of type of code. And I also see this type of code in like Alex Gray's art and his wife's art. And I see it in lots of people who represent that, who in the mushrooms, they also do the same sort of code. It's really strange. Yeah. So that's what that represents.
That's what you said earlier, something about code on the wall.
Yeah. That was a similar sort of code. It's sort of like this Aztec-y code that I've seen on the wall that night. And I see that through every experience that I have now.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's super crazy. And then I was online on Instagram. I run over a tattoo artist there, and I'm like, he's got exactly the same code in it.
Wow, really?
I write him a bit. I'm still tripping in the morning looking at this guy's art. I'm like, holy fuck. And I write him a message. So you in the mushrooms? He's like, yeah. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah,
I'd love to try and decode some of that, or to try.
Yeah,
I never seen that. I've seen like the red and green all the time, where it's like the Matrix. It's always red and green. It's always red and green for me. You guys know what I'm talking about. You've been
100%. Yeah.
Well, this has been great, guys. Is there anything else you want to get out there before we wrap this up?
Oh, we'll probably think of that later.
Yeah, as soon as you get off, we should have told them this. Yeah,
there's so much stuff that we probably missed, but it's been a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Yeah, no, this has been fantastic. A nice fresh episode with some cool guys. I mean, maybe we can have you back on after a year, see how things are going. I mean, it's really something that I'd love to follow it and see how you guys are doing there. I think it's great what you're doing, and anything that helps people healing from addiction. I mean, we're losing the battle of addiction right now. I mean, it's not going well. I mean, you mentioned AA, but it's the same as all these other treatment programs in recovery. It's like 5-10% max. People don't make it. So
more people make it with mushrooms.
That's why we want this podcast out. We need action. We need help. People.
Yeah, and maybe people will hear it and they'll be doing similar things in other parts of the world, or maybe they'll be inspired to continue with. I mean, must be a hard thing to kind of sort of accept and acknowledge when it happens to you. So maybe this will give people some courage to.
Yeah, I think, and that's what Glenn was saying before. I think that is the benefit of what putting this out there.
So weed's not legal in Australia? You guys don't have that fucking figured out yet? Weed's not legal?
Weed's not legal in Australia?
No.
No.
None of the states or nothing?
No. It's actually legal in the Canberra, which is the capital of Australia.
Is it like a serious thing or pretty easy to get?
It's become weeds everywhere, so it's become less and less. I mean, they're now doing random testing of it, roadside testing to see if you're under the influence of cannabis. But a lot of the magistrates throw it out because when did you smoke it now? Or
Prove
6
it,
weeks ago?
Prove it, bitch! I got a better lawyer than you. Well, maybe I'll make it to Australia one day. I would love to come to Australia. I got a little nervous after you guys got a little crazy with the COVID stuff, but then we got just as crazy, and it's like, what's the difference?
Yeah.
But
we want you here on a Friday night.
If I come there, I will eat mushrooms with you guys, 100%.
Yeah. We're going to fix you.
I got to well, okay. I can always be fixed a little bit more. I would never be so brazen as to say I'm fixed already. That'd be a crazy thing to say. You can always use a little more fixing. And it's such a long flight, but there is a bunch of people we could go see in Australia. We could do a whole thing. You know what I was thinking? We could get in touch with the Strong brothers and maybe do an event down there.
Who are the Strong brothers?
Is it Strong? Evan and Everett Strong? They're doing some crazy. They do some.
Oh, right.
I hope I'm not talking out my ass on my name. I think that's the name. Or it might be Stephen and Evan Strong. It might be Stephen and Evan.
They were doing the Uluru ceremonies.
And a bunch of stuff like that. They do a bunch of stuff and we do some events too. So I mean, it might be a good idea to dip into Australia before it's shut off completely, and come say hi. I need some mushrooms. And if you guys come to Canada, the mushrooms are on me.
Thanks, Dan.
What if we're talking to local people and they want to get a hold of you to do this?
Yeah,
is there an email, or do you want to send me an email? Is there an email or something, or how do you guys want to?
What we'll do, we'll send you one after this.
So I will. So for the audience, I will put an email in the show notes that they can go to the show notes. They can find an email for you guys if they're in Sydney and they can get it and they want to get a hold of you guys.
Yeah. Sure.
Sweet.
No
Thank
problem.
you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Awesome.
This has been great.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep up the good work.
It's been great. Yeah.
Big fan of your show, guys. See you.
Okay,
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Yeah.
See you, mate.
Bye.
See ya.
Yeah, and that was our chat with Mick and Mike. No,
Glenn.
Mick and Glenn. God damn it. I'm the worst with names. It's because if I met those guys in person, I would never forget their names.
Yeah,
I'm great
it's
with
different
names in person.
Yeah.
I can go to a CAC and know
was-
everybody's name after the introduction.
That was fantastic. Yeah.
That was great.
fun.
That was a fun
Yeah.
chat with those guys. Interesting enough, I got a message from Benjamin Grundy when I was chatting. I'm like, what are the chances of that?
Wow. Yeah.
Two
That's good.
Australians. We're talking to two Australians at the same time. And we're this weird sort of thing. We should go to Australia. Maybe we still can.
Can we still?
I
don't know.
I
don't know
can.
what the-
I think you can. Australia dropped their shit before us. So unvaccinated people can visit Australia, but they cannot visit the USA or Canada. Dun, dun,
Yeah,
dun,
it's very
the
strange,
West.
yeah.
The West baby.
Yeah.
And France. France is fucked too. And Peru, I heard. And Bolivia. Actually, I think most of South America is pretty crazy about that shit. Except Brazil. Anyway.
Yeah, that was a good episode. Yeah, I think it was great.
That was great. It was a great episode.
Inspiring. And, I love those guys just following their path. And it's just their, for free on Friday nights. Helping
those
people.
guys caught me off guard with the masks. Not going to lie. It was a great
No, they
chat.
weren't masks. They're painted. Their
Sorry, the
faces were
painted. The painted. That's what I was trying to figure out at first. I was like, is that mask or paint? What's happening? But yeah, Evan and Everett Strong. Stephen and Evan Strong. Maybe event idea. Have you been to Australia?
No.
See,
No.
someplace
That's what I
Graham's
haven't.
never been. Wow,
Yeah,
there we go.
yeah.
We could go someplace Graham's never been. Maybe I'll just go and I could be someplace you haven't. I'll be like, oh, you never been to Australia, bro? All right, guys. Big thanks to those guys for coming on the show. Glen and Mick for coming on the show from down under. Big thanks to you guys for listening. Even bigger thanks if you're supporting the show. We can't do this without you guys. We need your support. Help us keep fighting the good fight. Grimerica.ca/support. Sign up for a monthly today. Make a one-time donation. Head over to Grimerica.ca to get links for all our audiobooks, tours, chants, all that fun stuff. You can get to all of it from Grimerica.ca. All of our other projects. Support the show if you love it. We love you. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
From underneath the world I can see into the darkness beneath. For millions of miles, all the islands of light have enlightened me. Have enlightened me. But the sun will rise again, and the rays in my eyes will make me forget who I am in the night. Oh, but I know I've got you right where you want me to be. And I know you will not believe me until you see it indeed. Oh yes, indeed. Oh yes, From underneath the soles of my feet up to the top of the trees, the darkness I leave cast behind when you shine on